Joining us now is Patrick Moorhead. He is CEO and Chief Analyst of Moor Insights and Strategy. Again, I want to be clear, we don't know anything. We don't know any potential terms. We don't even know if it's going to happen, Patrick. But what was sort of your initial reaction, your hot take to the Intel news yesterday?
Well, I called this a week before, and I do believe that the U.S. government will put an investment into the Intel foundry side of the company, because it just makes sense, because we need a strong Intel foundry to win the AI race that everybody's talking about. And Intel is the only American company that is creating leading edge foundry, and the only American company to create the intellectual property that goes into building the leading edge and bleeding edge chips. And this is a very important distinction.
Fair. But when I first heard the news, and I'm just a jaded old news guy, was that my first thought was, I was thinking about cash for clunkers. If you remember that, 2008, 2009, sort of the bailout, the investments in Detroit. Right. How is this, if it happens, and we don't know the terms, if it were to happen, how is this not that?
That's right. And I mean, Palantir, the CIA's venture arm owns part of Palantir. So that was a winner. But I do understand the GM, Chrysler, and AIG. I think the big difference here is that having a strong auto industry is not necessarily about the future of the country's defense. I'm sure that some people would argue that I'm wrong, but to bring out the highest performance chips here in the United States, we need somebody on U.S. soil to be able to do this. Think about potentially if Taiwan gets invaded by China. Literally, we would not be able to advance the art of manufacturing, even with anybody's foundry, whether it's TSMC or Samsung, here on U.S. soil. And then we'd have to negotiate with the Chinese to see if we could get some of that intellectual property to be able to build it, or if they would even sell us the chips.
I get the national security point, and TSMC is rapidly adding capacity at the Phoenix, Arizona factory. We were there just a couple of months ago. We interviewed Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. So you would view this not as a, quote, bailout, if indeed it happened, but rather a strategic security investment. So if that was the case, and Patrick Moorhead was kind of running the show, where else should the government invest?
Well, we've already seen them invest in rare earth minerals with MP materials.
Yep.
Right? That was a relatively new one. And
well,
I think
to be fair, I was not. I'm gonna pat my back here. My producer Harriet Taylor and I have been to that mine twice, both on air. And the last time we were there, a member of the Department of Defense was there, kind of poking around, and we mentioned that on the air. So I'm going to give CNBC a little shout out that we're 2 for 2 on some of these places.
No, that is good. And, I'm 1 for 1 at least on this investment. We'll see what's going to happen here. But I also think there's going to be other investors. I do believe that we'll see a consortium of designer chip companies, from the AMDs to the Qualcomms, NVIDIAs, the Broadcoms, folks like that, who some of them, not all of them, will likely invest. We could also see some hyperscalers invest, because if you see, all of the hyperscalers are doing their own chips now, and they have the CapEx, they have the money, and quite frankly, the $40 billion that is required, it's not nothing, but in aggregate, if I look at the CapEx and I look at the value plus the potential national security, I also want to address the clunkers part, right? Intel did have challenges initially. In fact, they designed what was called 18A, was not what's called a foundry node. It was made for their own chips. So they kind of back-ended 18A into that. But this new one called 14A is absolutely a foundry-led, and they have the time to get this out there. I want to make a key point here. Taiwan owns 6% of TSMC. Taiwan was a 48% owner in TSMC when it was created, and they have poured billions into TSMC as we're hand wringing these types of things.